That's what we do, man's on the grind, that's what we do. Ain't gonna stop, evolving our game on a daily basis. Stay on the top of the game, make a statement, enter the win. We ain't gonna lose, the grind don't stop, but I need your boost, I'll see you at the top.
Welcome back to the Evolve Your Game podcast. I'm Dan Van, and this is my co-host Alistair Collins, and we're extremely excited to have our next guest on the podcast. Nelson College, Tasman Markle, Taranaki Hurricanes legend, All Blacks Sevens representative, as well as playing abroad at London Irish, Coca-Cola Sparks and Ironi. Host of New Zealand Rugby's greatest podcast, the What a Lad podcast, and arguably New Zealand Rugby's biggest prank pest. Finally saw the light and is now the assistant coach of the greatest rugby franchise in the world, of course, the Crusaders. Welcome along, Jimmy.
Mate, thanks
James
for
Marshall.
having me on. It's quite nice to be on the other side of the mic, not having to prepare anything or just sort of turn up and plug the mic in and have a yarn. So looking forward to it.
Brilliant, Jimmy. Welcome along, mate.
Thanks, mate.
Appreciate it.
So we'll start with the early days. So born in Auckland and then moved to Nelson. Is that right?
Yeah. Born up in Auckland. I moved down to Nelson when I was about 8 years old.
Yeah.
Moved the whole family moved down. Not really sure what the reason was. Mum sort of says it was around giving us a better opportunity at sport. Auckland's such a big place. We only really had one car, so we were never from sort of a huge amount of money. Had everything we needed, but that was about it. We just spent most of our time growing up in the backyard, me and my brother playing a lot of one-on-one sport. That was essentially it.
Yeah, nice. I did talk to Tom. his description of you as a little fella was extremely shy, didn't put his head underwater till he was about 10, hated contact, wouldn't answer the phone. And his first year of code, he just spent picking daisies. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I can't argue with any of that, really, mate. I don't know if it was 10 till I put my head under, but it was definitely a bit later than it should have been. I was a bit of a mouse, to be fair. I remember playing rugby for the first time. Parents took us down when we were 5, so he must have been 3 or 4, and I hated it. I was in tears, and he was loving it. So it definitely wasn't a natural love at first sight for me playing it. But eventually, I always loved the game. I loved watching it. Eventually got into it. But yeah, definitely picked a few daisies. Even when I came down to Nelson, I think there's a photo of me picking a few daisies. So that would have been 8 years old. Still wasn't quite into the contact stuff then either.
Yeah, nice. You played a bit of football and a bit of cricket too, eh?
I played football till in Auckland, so 5 to 8, and then switched to rugby when I moved down there, basically because my friends were all playing it down there.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Just dabbled in a little bit of cricket here and there, but nothing too major on the cricket front. Mainly backyard games, really.
I heard you're right. Are you being humble?
Nah, who's telling you I'm all right? Because it might have been Tom, because I used to bowl him out like all the time. So.
He said then, though, he after, I don't know what stage it was, but he said you absolutely just switched to go full coat head and just loved every minute of it for rugby.
Yeah, I did. Like I said, I did always love it. Like, I always loved watching it. I loved sort of studying it. I loved all my school books were full of like fantasy teams or like Form 15s. I used to love sort of making up teams together or making my All Blacks team or things like that. So I always loved the actual code of it, but it wasn't until a bit later where I really started loving the rugby side. And I wasn't like that good. I never really made the rep teams. It wasn't until I was I think I missed out on the under-16 team with Nelson College, which was sort of the moment where I remember sort of flicking the switch and thinking, shit, I want to really give this a go. So got a gym membership for Christmas that year. I knew it because I was always small, skinny, weak. I knew those were probably the main things I weren't going to get selected on. So that was probably the first things I tried to change. And got myself the gym membership, went pretty hard, went pretty much almost every day to the gym. And things started happening from there. I made the first 15 the following year and captain in the year after. And then out of school, made Tasman Academy. And the year after, I was playing first class rugby with the Tasman Mako. So
Nice.
once I did flick that switch, it all happened pretty quick, or it felt like it did. And the rest was then sort of the journey started from there.
Yeah, nice. I heard a bit of a yarn. I don't know if it's a yarn or not. Or actually, Tom kind of agreed with it. You bench more than you can squat. You're about 141.
by quite a fair bit. So even back then, like I said, I used to go to. I've always had dodgy hips, so
of course,
even as a young fellow, I was never great on the squat. Used to sort of flare my hip up a wee bit. Gave it a go for a few years, but I definitely got my bench up there. So I was benching
140, 150?
Yeah, 150 at about 19, 20 years old, which...
and what weight were you at that stage?
I would have been 84 or something, probably.
Decent.
Yeah.
Nice.
Because, like I said, the teams were always selected on...
Too, right?
Yeah. The teams are always selected on, strength testing. Like they were the metrics you're measured on, from coaches. So I sort of realised that pretty early and knew that was going to be the ones that were going to let me down. So when they would go and say, "Hey, you're not strong enough, or you don't look strong enough on the field," they'd check the scores and then, you are strong enough. So that can't be a reason we can't pick you. It's they'd have to find something else.
Nice. Were your hips thing like a genetic thing, or just an injury that early on, or?
No, it was never an injury. I think it was just a bit of a genetic thing. I don't know what caused it, or I can't even really remember when it first started. But I did find my old Tasman Academy book where I did have my initial body screening, and the physio even wrote comments on my hips back then, saying that I'd struggle to have a long career in the game, which I obviously remembered. And had hip surgery at, I think it was about 25. That got me till the end of my career, where I had one more, and that second time I was done.
What was the surgery? What was the correction? Or
basically just shaving all so there's bony growths on the ball in the ball and socket. So there was all sorts of damage getting done every time I'd sort of move around on it. So there's a fair bit going on. The second time, the surgeon said, was by far the worst hip he's ever seen.
Oh, wow.
So once he said that, I knew it was going to be hard to get back. And even 3 years post-surgery now, I'm still struggling on it a little bit. So definitely forced me into retirement.
Sorry, Jimmy, I'll just butt in. As a young guy there, having those poor hips, what do you actually do? It's obviously tough for a young guy to hear that or deal with. Was it a pain tolerance thing? Could you just play through that pain, or were there strength exercises that you implemented into your routine that allowed you to play?
Yeah, it wasn't painful early on in my career. I didn't really notice. I was always super tight and really restricted. So getting into deep squat positions and things weren't really for me. And I just sort of just carried on like that. But it was when I got to the end of my career, then it was a pain tolerance thing. It was becoming really sore, especially off the field. So once I'd get off the field or post training, or getting up off the couch or getting into the car and things like that were just painful. So towards the back end of my career, definitely I stopped enjoying playing, basically because of the hip and the pain that I was going through to have to get back out there every week. So when I did eventually retire, I was actually quite happy about it. I know a lot of guys miss it, but I certainly wasn't missing it because what I'd gone through for probably 2 or 3 years before I did finish. So, yeah.
Yeah, nice. So Nelson College was when it sort of started to get serious. The rugby class, does that start around when you were there?
Yeah, I think it started like the year before I could make it, and because I think it was I could be at sixth form. What's that? Year 12.
Yeah.
So I think it started when I was year 11, and I was so excited to be able to go to rugby class the following year. Like that was the first thing I was signing up for.
Yeah.
Because I did want to be a professional rugby player. Like,
yeah.
Even when I wasn't making these teams, that was always my dream. And I never thought I'd have the career I did. I thought it would be more of a gypsy journeyman where I'd be playing in all sorts of countries with a part-time job and just, living that rugby dream. But like I said, once I started sacrificing a few more things, like things did start to happen pretty quick for me. And look back on my career and do sort of pinch myself how I got there because, I don't know if I was made to be a rugby player, but I certainly forced myself into one.
You mentioned sacrifices there, Jim. Just for our younger listeners, what did they look like for you at high school and into your early professional career?
Well, I think one of the things I definitely did, and I think I probably trained harder those years than I ever did. I think my perception of how like the All Blacks and stuff trained in my mind was like David Goggins stuff. I just thought they'd be like incredible, like never stop. They'd be eating, but it wasn't till I actually got into the environment and I sort of realized that, hang on, I was actually training harder than these guys train. Like the stuff I was doing by myself were probably some of the hardest sessions that I did. Maybe Gordon Titchen's ones were up there as well. They were pretty tough. But like genuinely, I was surprised at, I guess, of the lack of professionalism, especially going into the Tasman Mako team early on. Because guys were like on the piss all the time. Some were still smoking. And I remember seeing the first guy smoking. I was like, holy hell, like, how are you smoking? Like, what are you up to? Like, really? Like, how is this possible? So, I think my work ethic as a young fella coming through the grades was definitely something that put me in a good stead. And when I was trialing for 20s, I think there was a 6 to 8 month period where I stopped drinking. So that was a little sacrifice I made to give myself the best chance. And I remember all my mates who were better footy players than me, like, I thought I was probably going a little bit unnecessary, which I don't know if it was or not, but giving myself that sacrifice just made me want to achieve my goal more. So I was training harder and doing all those things. So just a few little things like that where I tried to give myself the best chance to crack it. I didn't make the 20s or 19s, but I think if I didn't put in that effort to make it, I wouldn't have been a Tasman Mako that following season.
When you missed out on those teams, did that just add to the fire, or how did you manage? Like you're pretty close from what I heard.
Yeah, I was relatively close, but I wasn't super surprised or disappointed. Like I was almost surprised to be there. Right. I never really, because it all happened so quick, I never really felt like I was good enough. I felt quite uncomfortable in those environments because, 5 years earlier I was picking daisies in the in the field. So it was pretty crazy. But I remember Dave Rennie telling me, like he said, because we all had to fill out like this action plan thing where we had to like write a diary of what we were doing, all the training, all our nutrition and all that sort of stuff. And he felt like mine was the best out of everyone. He really wanted to pick me, but just my performance in the trial just wasn't good enough. And I really respected that because I knew I hadn't had a good trial. And I think that was probably down to me not really believing I was good enough. I felt like I was not meant to be there. So, but to hear that from him gave me a lot of confidence that I wasn't too far off and all the things I was doing was the right things. And if I keep doing that, I'll get there eventually. So, I took that on board and got there in the end.
What made that environment
go.
like uncomfortable for you? Obviously, it's a bit of a pressure cooker at underage level. You're trying to please people, but yeah, what made it truly uncomfortable for you?
I guess it was the fact that there was guys who were playing NPC. They had like Israel Dag and I think Zach Guilford and the likes were already playing NPC, Andre Taylor. And here's me who's coming from like Nelson College. A couple of years earlier, couldn't make the rep team. We weren't a massive rugby school back then. Things have changed now. It's a pretty impressive rugby setup now, but I hadn't come from great coaching, probably unfair on Peter Grigg, but like the Hamilton boys setups and stuff were like full on basically rugby academies where we were still playing like a very average shape and structure. I didn't understand any of that sort of stuff. So going into those trials and trying to learn all that as a 10, I definitely felt uncomfortable trying to boss these guys around and tell them what to do without really understanding the game like these guys did.
What about in that rugby school, that rugby class? I imagine it's evolved quite a bit since then, but what did that kind of involve? What sort of things did they help you with that help you get to?
Back then, when I was there, it was basically a license for me to go to the gym, get my bench press up, do a kicking session, skills, that sort of stuff. We had to do like a referee course and a bit of coaching and stuff like that. So it was all good stuff. It's growing massively. Like I was up there last year doing a little bit of work for Nelson College and the rugby class up there as well. So what it is now, it's definitely impressive. I think they kind of use it as a little bit of a extra training or review session.
Yeah.
All the things that professional rugby players do these days, you're sort of getting a feel for that earlier than I did.
Yeah, cool. And so you said you're uncomfortable at that point, but then was there a point where you actually started feeling like you were more like you could make that level when you were capable and you started making the Marco teams and stuff like that?
Yeah, I don't know. I felt like every time I just felt like I was getting better and better, but every time I went up that level, I still felt uncomfortable, and that was sort of all the way through. But after like my first year with Tasman, I felt more comfortable. I felt like I was ready. I managed to get some starts that following year, and I felt it probably wasn't until then where I felt like I was ready and good enough to be playing at that level. My first game, I actually injured my ankle, so I was out for most of the season, but I had a pretty good 20 minutes against Taranaki, and I remember being pretty gutted because I felt like this was my opportunity. I was going to be starting 10 that year. And then the little injury right when I felt like it was all getting going set me back a wee bit.
Yeah, no. So just another wee insight from Tom Taylor. He said Tom
Taylor?
Marshall.
You've gone everywhere.
Tom Taylor. Sorry, Tom Marshall. He was saying a couple of he did give me a few stories, but he said most of them went probably they might be under the bus for you. But he said you spent a few times. The races was a big thing for you guys. It's to hang out the races. Was that sort of pre professional rugby stuff, or was it sort of towards the start of it, or just all throughout?
No, like our whole life was evolved around race tracks and TABs. My dad was a punter, and he like when he was looking after me, my brother would either be at a race course or a TAB more often than not. So like we often laugh because like when we go around New Zealand, we know our landmarks are basically the TABs. We remember those spots and the things around it because that's where we spend a lot of our time. And obviously being around that, we both grew up as guys who loved to punt, and spent a lot of time on the punt throughout my career. And it like moments where I look back, I was like, man, that was crazy because we'd be listening to races just before games or
Oh, really?
or things like that. Or had so many syndicates throughout my time with different players all over the world. So had some good times as well. Like it was always quite a good social thing to go down, especially in Taranaki where they've got quite a big horse racing culture up there. Would all meet down at the pub, have a syndicate and just sort of chew the fat and have a good time. But spent way too much time watching it and studying it. And I think what I could have done with some of those hours, but I feel like every rugby player's got it, and it could have been worse. Like, you hear stories of other guys. I guess the beauty for me was I was so sort of tight with my money that I just hated losing money so much that I was never a big gambler. I never got into big figures. I never really lost money. I know people find it hard to believe, but used to go through different betting accounts and always try and find ways to beat the system just to stay ahead. So, spent a hell of a lot of time gambling and watching the horses, but I don't do it now. So it's been quite cool.
You said you used to eat the 6 before 6 and then a bottle of wine before 9.
Cup week special.
Was a bit of a tradition for a while.
Yeah, so that was Cup week special. We did a few good trips down to Cup week, Riccarton races, 6 before 6, catch up with a few mates, all go to one of the guys' houses who would host. So we'd set the alarm at about 5:30 or 5:15, which was always a bit of a rough start, depending how quickly you reckon you could get through your 6. And then, it was always a bit of a mission. And then on to the wine before the 9. And then everyone is into their work, just hanging on till 12 o'clock first race. Really.
Unbelievable.
Nice.
Yeah, mate.
I wouldn't hear take over the rugby.
I'm a massive, I'm a bit like you, bit of a rugby nuffy. Watched a heap of games, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. ITM Cup, as it was back in the day, you running a muck, even the New Zealand Cup, I remember some of those days. So I will start at the very start, though, at Nelson College. Obviously, not a massive rugby school back in your day. Rumour has it was you that made it a rugby school. What were some of the biggest rivalries at Nelson College, and were there any massive stars on your opposition side?
Well, I think that probably the biggest rivalry was Marlborough Boys, obviously just over the hill, closest competitive school for us. But we had a lot of tough battles with Christchurch Boys. Lost to them in the final both years, or one of them was in the semi. But they were such a tough side. They were so stacked. I think if I could probably name this side, and basically everyone became a professional rugby player from there, starting 15. So crazy squad when you look back at it. I think they were definitely the two. I remember playing our final at Jade Stadium, which was a pretty special memory for me, one that I always remember. We got pumped, but it was my first time on a big stadium like that, and it just felt all a little bit different, felt so cool being a part of that. It was all on TV and that sort of thing, which wasn't that common back then. So one of those games where you really feel like you're almost a professional,
Awesome.
Yeah.
No, that's it's great stuff. And then obviously from the Nelson College into the Tasman Marco setup, obviously you've talked a wee bit about that transition. I want to dig a bit deeper. What was the environment like in terms of personnel? You're in that day where there could have been a bit of old boys syndrome still lurking in professional rugby because it was still relatively early doors. What were the players like inviting you in as a young fella?
Yeah, there's definitely still that old school sort of mentality. I was probably a young guy that they like to get hold of too, to be fair. I remember one of my first away trips, there was Ben May, Blair Cook, Twisty Moran, who called me into their room. And as soon as I walked in, shut the door, tied me up, tried to put me a blindfold on, tie me to a chair, and had a broomstick. And I was like, oh no, what's thankfully nothing happened. But I was like, geez, this is brutal. Yeah, and they did finally release me after, I don't know how long it was. It felt like forever, but yeah, there was all sorts of stuff like that would always go on. But they were all really good. Like nothing was too malice. It was all a bit of banter, and I luckily had Andrew Goodman, who sort of took me under his wing coming out of college. He helped me heaps with all my training and picked me up and dropped me off because I didn't have a car. So like he was massive for me, and yeah, I think him being my mate was sort of helped everyone else invite me into the environment
awesome.
A little bit easier.
And now, obviously, your debut game. Just want to get your sort of input on the like difference in level. Obviously, you probably played a wee bit of club rugby. Did you play a bit of club rugby prior to that? And then, what was that jump like?
Yeah, so I played a full season of club my first year out, and then another full season. So 2 full seasons of club before I had a crack. And then my first game was, I remember it was against Auckland, but it was a pre-season game. And that was, I remember, because that was my first time going up against like professional players. I remember Isaiah Toiava was in the opposition. He'd just been released from the All Blacks. And I mean, I remember watching him in Super Rugby, and he looked impossible to tackle, you know, like especially for someone like me who was never a great tackler. And I remember him running at me, and I tackle him, and I remember thinking, oh, it's like they do fall down. Like it's like they're not superhuman, the sort of image that I expected them to be. I was expecting to go flying trying to tackle him, but I tackled him, got some confidence, and I ended up having quite a good game that day, and came off that field thinking it wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. So I don't know if that was because I'd built up this expectation of what it was going to be like, or what. But yeah, I know most guys think, geez, they were so surprised with how intense it was or the level, but I was almost the opposite. I almost built up such a big expectation in my mind that when I actually got out there, it was a lot easier than I envisioned. So we're not sure if that's the right thing to do or not, but that's what I did.
I'm not sure what Goody was asking about, but he said when your Nelson Rugby Club days, did you have empathy for his forward pack? not sure where he's going with that.
Empathy for his forward pack, yeah. It was one of my earlier reviews. This was with Tasman, end of season review with Kieran Kane, who was quite an intimidating coach. He'd tell you pretty straight. I got along with him well. I quite enjoyed him, but came out of my review and like all he was speaking about was my empathy, and like, I didn't really understand what that meant in terms of rugby. Like, he just sort of said, "You've got no empathy," and in back of my head, I'm like not really sure what he's meaning. But you know, later on in my career, it all comes to me that because I used to love to play, I'd play from deep. I wasn't I didn't have a massive kicking game. I wasn't controlling games with pressure cycles or kick plans. I was looking to just play to space, and often that was on the edge. So our early Tasman days, we were going wide, just me and my brother trying to find space in the back line pretty much. And Kieran Kane basically just said, mate, you've just got no empathy because you're running these forwards around. They're playing 10 plus phases deep in their half, and then you're expecting them to go on a quick tap because you think it's on again, a chip chase. He's just like, you've got zero empathy for your forward pack. So it did start to make sense. But at the time, I came out of that meeting like, what the hell is he? How do I work on empathy?
Unbelievable. So obviously in the Marcos jersey, what were some of your highlights?
I remember a Shield challenge pretty early on in my career against Wellington. We didn't have, that was the first one we'd ever had, and it was a pretty close game. Then we got a yellow card and they scored a couple of tries. Just sort of got away with it from us there. But I remember coming off the bench and getting a try myself, and I always remember that one. First time at Westpac Stadium. That was one that stands out.
Early doors Shield
probably the
challenge.
best one for me.
And then we'll get into the Shield a bit later with Taranaki, but first 2011 rolls around and you get selected into the New Zealand Sevens team. What did that phone call look like, and how did that come about?
Yeah, so I played the Queenstown Sevens tournament for Tasman. Had an okay tournament, and then Gordon Titchens just called me up, asked me if I wanted to go to the camp, and super keen to get there. Went okay at camp, wasn't sure if I was going to make it or not. They had so many quality players. Then they called us into a room and told me that I'd be going on the next tournaments, which was Gold Coast and Dubai. So once I got that call, I was pretty stoked. I knew what it meant. Like at the time, it also meant that I was locking myself into New Zealand, which probably did cost me a fair bit later on in my career, but they've obviously changed the rules now. But for me, I was always branded as a international New Zealand player, so I was competing with All Blacks and stuff for contracts when I was a 2 tournament sevens player, which wasn't ideal, but I knew what I was getting into. But when I had that opportunity to play for my country, sevens, it was. I was so stoked. I was looking forward to it. I genuinely thought it could be a long-term option for me. That was probably as far as I got. And I did ask Titch if he does give me a full contract, like a year contract, I'll do sevens. And if he gave me that, then I might have been like the long-term sevens player, where like the Tim Mickelson sort of setup where
just doesn't
sevens
stop.
was going to be my game.
That guy does not stop. He's
funny how it all changed. Yeah.
Crazy.
Incredible, eh?
Bit of insight. We've had a couple people that have mentioned about Titch and what that involves. Can you remember what day one involved with Titch?
Running.
A lot of running. So like 2 tests early. The first test was yo-yo. Oh no, not yo-yo, beep test. And then we're into the phosphate, which is 40-meter sprints on a 30-second turnaround. You do 10 of them. So after those 2 tests, because they're like max efforts and he wants to see you max it. I remember my beep test, finishing my beep test, my last one I tried to do, like my legs went all jelly on me. And he was, I know he was loving it because that's what he wanted to see, but my legs were gone for the next test. And then straight from that test, you're out onto the field and you're playing games, and massive amounts of games and lots of unnecessary running in between them. So, mate, GPS weren't really around back then, but I would have clocked up some massive Ks in those. But for me, like I said, like I'd always trained pretty hard. Fitness was probably always my biggest strength. So like I wasn't too bad compared to a lot of guys who I know find it like the worst possible thing ever. But I didn't mind running, but getting into some of those games, that's the stuff that really tired me, like having to tackle and wrestle and clean out and all that stuff. That's when my body would just really hit fatigue. So Yeah, thankfully it was more running than wrestling and stuff. But I know now these days there's way more wrestling and stuff like that, so it's probably
Obviously,
worse for me now.
fitness wise, Yo-Yo, what was your PB?
Yo-Yo was 21.3, I think, or was it 23.1? I'm going to say it's 21. Yeah, definitely, isn't it? Yeah. And beep test was that about a 15? I think 15 was like a good high score. So, well, we only did that a couple of times with the sevens. It got outdated pretty quick. But, 21.3 was my yo-yo. I'd run that pretty consistently, and I just couldn't really get much past that one. That last shuttle would always sort of do me. It sort of gets too fast. Even if I started on level 17, I reckon I still wouldn't probably get past that. It just, the lactic builds up and I'm pretty much done.
2012 rolls around, mate, and the Hurricanes come calling. Obviously, what did that look like for you? How did that next sort of chapter come about?
Yeah, so I missed out on, so I was hoping to get the Sevens contract, and then while I was at Sevens, the Hurricanes offered me a wider squad contract, and I said that I'd come do it if I didn't get this Sevens contract, and turns out Titch didn't offer me that contract, so then I went to the Hurricanes for the wider squad, and I was stoked. I was always a massive Hurricanes fan growing up. I loved them. I loved Christian Cullen. I loved all of those guys. They were like my heroes growing up. I was pretty obsessed. So to actually be in that environment was pretty incredible. And, looking around, and I think first day there, the boys were all running yo-yo as well. And you see like the Conrad Smiths and all these guys you looked up to for so long. You're now part of their team.
Unreal.
Which was,
who were the other
pretty
10s
special.
there? Would have been Dan Kirkpatrick. Bodie would have been there. Early doors Bodie. So you were, did you get any communication about where you were in line there, or?
Because I was wider squad, I knew I was the bottom. I just did the pre-season, and then I went back up to Taranaki, and I was only called in when guys were injured or anything had happened. So I only got called in once, and that was for a week. So I didn't get a huge amount in the environment, but did enough that next year with Taranaki to get a full squad that following year. So that's when it was sort of all on for me.
And that's what I really want to dig into with you. Obviously, Taranaki played a massive part in your rugby career. 36 games, 46 points. Also captained the side and played, helped hold or retain the Ranfurly Shield. Can you tell us a bit more about that? Obviously, you were at Tasman, so what happened with Tasman, and then how did the Taranaki call eventuate?
Yeah, so back then you had to be in the region to get a wider squad. So I had to move up to Taranaki to be part of the Hurricanes squad. So it was a no-brainer. I didn't really want to leave Tasman. I loved Tasman. I always thought I'd be there my whole career, but opportunity at the Hurricanes I wasn't going to turn down. And then moving up to Taranaki was unbelievable, like such a cool environment up there as well. Team had the shield when I moved up there, so I was playing in some big games. Coming off the bench, Bodie was starting, but loved it. Loved those big occasions. They got a super cool support base up there, especially when they're doing well. The season when we won it was incredible. Like the way that community, that town got behind us was so cool, and some of the best games that I played in my career, like not best personally, but some of the coolest games I played in. Hearing that crowd and feeling that energy from them, and getting through a tough semi in a extra time, and then beating Tasman in a final in one of the niggliest games of my life as well. So, such good memories up there.
It must have been sort of bittersweet getting over Tasman in that final.
It certainly wasn't bittersweet. At the time, I was all in with Taranaki. Like, I was obviously captain, and out on that field, I was copping so much niggle from all those boys. So, like, when we won it, I was so relieved and so grateful to have won that game. I don't think we played particularly well. We're pretty lucky to win it, but we were just all in it together, and we had such a cool environment. Like, the team got along really well, and great bunch of lads, and all put in a big shift to win a trophy, which I think was the first time they'd ever done it, and only time they've ever done it.
Obviously,
pretty special memories.
Takes quite a special sort of bond between players, coaching staff, all the above in that environment to win a premiership as it was at the time. What made it so successful in that environment?
Yeah, I just felt like we just got our culture right. Like, a lot of guys were from out of town, and we spent a lot of time together. We enjoyed each other's company, and we nailed a lot of our rugby stuff. We had some quality players who hadn't really thrived yet. Like, we had a young Waisaki Naholo, Seta Tamanivalu, who no one knew at the time. Like, we were rank outsiders to win the competition that year. TAB had us at $30 outsiders. Canterbury were like $1.60 or whatever favourites, because they'd won it almost the last sort of 10 years leading up to it. So no one was giving us a chance, and we even lost our first two games, or we drew our first one and lost our second one. So it wasn't looking good. Odds probably drifted out to about 101 by then. So I just felt like we had a really good culture. The coaches connected the group really well, and had some players find confidence in their game and perform when we needed them to. And they all ended up going on to higher honours. And we look back at that team now and thought it was a stacked team, but going into that season, no one was saying it was a stacked team.
No, it was it was a good watch. I watched a lot of rugby during that period of time, and it was just I didn't really like the Premiership Championship setup, but the quality of code was good, and see players such as yourself made it pretty easy to view. We'll move on. First Super Rugby match for the Hurricanes against Crusaders, 2013. How'd you find that?
Yeah, I honestly don't even remember that one as my debut. Like, I must have come off the bench for a few minutes, but I don't really remember that game. I remember my first sort of game being against the Highlanders, because that was my first start. And I remember running out to Forsyth Bar, crowd was hissing, and I just remember like, wow, this is so cool. Like, this sort of pinch yourself moment. And that, I remember playing not that great. I got dropped the following week, and felt like I didn't really nail my opportunity, and I knew how little opportunities you sort of get at that level. So I was pretty gutted, but keep chipping away and managed to get another opportunity. And the next time I took it a bit better.
Rugby, how big is that jump from your Mitre 10 or your Tasman Mako, Taranaki rugby into Super Rugby? How big is that jump?
It's hard to say. Like, it does depend on the games. Like, those finals in the NPC, like, were as intense as a majority of the Super Rugby games. But then when you get to the intense games of Super Rugby, you go into that whole nother level. So it wasn't too big of a step up. I just noticed that any little error was just noticed way more at Super Rugby level. So I probably made 3 mistakes in that debut game for me, which would have been all right playing NPC, but wasn't good enough for the Hurricanes, obviously. And being on debut, that was me done, because just can't afford to be making those sort of mistakes at that level. And you learn pretty quick that what you need to do. And yeah, for me, it was about not making mistakes and being really consistent with my performance so that they could select me every week.
Awesome. 2016 rolls around, the Hurricanes. Yeah, every rugby nuffy knows what a special year that was for the team. Obviously, losing to the Highlanders in the final in 2015. I presume it built a hell of a lot of resilience in the environment. Do you want to talk us through that special season and obviously the big part you played in that final as well?
I always remember 2015, like that was really the year because I felt like our team was better that year than it was the following year. We just, for whatever reason, it was one of those games where it felt like we were going to win. We probably should have won that one, but we didn't. And I genuinely reckon we would have won that game probably 8 or 9 times out of 10 if we played that match 10 times in a row. Like it was just one of those days where the Highlanders were just all over us. They're all fired up. Nothing sort of went our way. And we just were making uncharacteristic errors. They obviously had a great plan around it as well. But when you compare those sides on paper, like we really should have been winning that one. But obviously games aren't won on paper. But the following year, I felt like we learnt a lot around our preparation into a final. And we started off really slow. I think we lost our first 2. Everyone was calling us fat and overweight. And then we sort of found our rhythm. And remember one game, it really changed where we changed our D around and just started bringing really hissing line speed. It sort of changed the game of rugby, I felt like, defensive point of view. Like not many teams had defended like that with that line speed. And often we'd talk to opposition after the games and they'd sort of mention they'd previewed for line speed, but they didn't know it was going to be that much line speed. Like everyone says they're a line speed team, but we were like full on sprinting off the line and teams were just getting surprised by it. And I don't think we conceded a try through the playoffs in that year and definitely won that final on the back of that defense and obviously had enough tacking ability in that squad as well to score enough points. We had like Bodie, who was absolutely running amok. He scored a pretty freakish try in the final. We got one down from a charge down too. So definitely wasn't really our attacking game that got us there, but on the back of our D, we're creating so many opportunities off it. We're probably scoring more tries from our D than we were attacked. So pretty special year, pretty special group, and it was an unreal experience to win that trophy.
Yeah, it was. I was a bit gutted the Landers couldn't go back to back, but it was good to see. It's good to see nonetheless. After that season, obviously you went over to London Irish. Obviously, what was the change in rugby over there compared to here? I was at school the other day and watched some highlights and a highlights video on YouTube of you, and a lot of your highlights actually came from your London Irish days. So, do you want to talk us through the difference in rugby over there?
Geez, it didn't feel like there was a lot of highlights over there. It was probably because we had so many games. The difference was massive. I noticed it straight away, like just the mentality around how you play the game in terms of kick pressure, set piece, the percentage game of rugby was something I probably struggled with, especially coming from the Hurricanes where it was a lot more free, play the space. So it took me a while to adjust. I don't know if I actually did adjust in the 2 years I was over there because I was still seeing things which I felt like were on, but no one else was even interested in taking those options. We were just all about trying to get to our best kick. So I definitely struggled over there, but I loved my time. Like it was an unbelievable experience.
Is that why you were sort of playing more midfield over there as well because of your kicking game?
No, I didn't play in the midfield. I was mainly fullback or 10. So depending on who else was available. Played a little bit of midfield in Japan, but that was, I'm not sure why that was. That was just Yeah, crazy move. But yeah, I played mainly fullback and 10 in the Premiership, and I enjoyed both positions. I felt like I was probably more of a 10 in the majority of teams. I preferred fullback with the Hurricanes because Bodie was at 10, and I could be really effective with my comms to him because he was so accurate. So, yeah, but in those sort of teams, I like having control of the game. I like driving the game, so driving the game plan and adjusting those plans to what's happening. But yeah, I probably didn't really have my head around the English style of footy enough to really warrant being at 10. So switched it around quite a bit, and yeah, I don't know how successful it was. It was probably on par.
Awesome. And then managed to pick up you went to Italy in the Pro 12 as well. How did that actually come about? Because obviously you're at London, and then how did you manage to sneak over to Italy?
Yeah, so Italy was when
doors.
I was 20. So this was when I'd early doors. I just missed out on the Crusaders. I think it was my first year of Tasman. Didn't make any super gigs, so got an opportunity to go over to Italy on a 6-month gig, and instead of playing club rugby. So yeah, loved that opportunity. It was such a cool experience. Real eye opener for me and my girlfriend, now wife at the time. So I was still living at home and doing, like, I couldn't drive, and there I am over in Italy with a manual car they'd given me, living by myself, trying to cook in all these Italian foods, not speaking a word of Italian. So it was a real rude awakening for me. Made me grow up pretty quick.
Gonna flick it sort of to Dan now. Obviously, 2019, you got named back in the Hurricanes squad, but didn't play a massive part, and that's sort of when your transition to coaching started. Do you want to talk us through sort of your role and how your transition to coaching started, sort of through the unfortunate injury?
Yeah, so I signed back with the Hurricanes for 2 years. So back then I could go Japan and Hurricanes, so it was a awesome way for me to finish. And like Japan financially was awesome, and still I was hoping to have the opportunity to play high level of rugby again. Didn't really work out. Injuries and form as well. I wasn't playing that well. I was struggling on my hip. So yeah, I always loved the coaching side of things. I did without being a coach, I always felt like I had a pretty big say in what we were running each week in terms of our game plan and some of the maps we were running. I always liked to be all over that. I love to preview teams quite strongly by myself and go up and see the coaches and share my ideas before we all sort of met. So I was always sort of doing it. I knew that coaching would I always knew I'd love to coach, but got to the point where I'd moved so much in my career that I actually didn't really want to coach because I didn't want to keep having to move around, and you sort of do have to do that with coaching. So sort of parked the idea of coaching in my mind anyway. But then COVID hit. I had my hip surgery. Carlos Spencer left, and Jason Holland calls me and asked me if I could take over the backs for the rest of the season. So it was literally going from the player's office to the coach's office and overnight. And yeah, I actually found it a lot easier than it probably sounds, because like I said, I was already doing so much. The players all respected my rugby opinion, and I felt like I could I guess, talk to them around some of the best options, or have open conversations with them and try and come up with the best plan. So yeah, I loved it from the moment I started doing it, and then moved down to Nelson where we looked to settle. Opportunity at Tasman Marco came up to coach. So I said I'd coach wherever we settled, and that sort of happened, and then not long after, Razor calls me and asks me if I want to move down to Christchurch. So that was probably the hardest one for us, but tough one to turn down, obviously.
Yeah, nice. Probably the smoothest transition from player to coach. I talked to Razor, and because I was pretty intrigued just to find out why, someone who's only really had a year of coaching experience to go straight to Crusaders is pretty big call from him. So he said, where is he? He's over in France, obviously, so it's pretty short. But he said, you're always going to be a coach. Your playing days, you knew your game so well, and you're a great people person. He said word circulates very quickly that you're doing a great job at Tasman, and it was an easy call. So pretty good rap from the man.
Yeah. I remember like when he called me, and I wouldn't have gone for the job if it was like to apply for, because I wouldn't have thought I would have had a shot one, and I didn't really want it either, really. Like, didn't really want to have to move the family down. So when he did call, it was tough, like having those conversations with my family. And do we want to move? Do we want to do this coaching thing? And I can't say it was a strong yes, but we got there in the end, and we're here, and I'm loving it. Like, it's been such an awesome experience. I got to learn from two of the greatest Super Rugby coaches almost ever, I reckon, with Razor and Scott Hansen, and the environment is so incredible. The players are all were awesome for me, and understanding that, probably was my first year. I had a fair bit to work on. So, I just really enjoyed the first year, and looking forward to next year and growing as a coach.
How'd you manage changing that, being, teammate, mate, and then becoming a coach? Was that a difficult transition, like in terms of how that personality and any boundaries change or anything like that? Was it?
For me, I didn't really change anything, and I still really haven't. I obviously don't hang out with. I don't go to lunch with the players because we've got our own management things on. But like I'd still go around to some of the boys' houses for a barbecue, or I know some coaches like to fully remove themselves, but I just joke with them like I'm still a player. I often forget that I'm a coach until the meeting starts and I'm so out the front. But I don't know if it's necessary. I know a lot of coaches say it is, but I just feel like they know the boundaries. They know when I want something, or when we're switching into rugby mode, or we're all being serious. But when we're not, I don't feel like I need to separate myself from them or be this different person. I just, just be who I am, and try and have a real natural relationship with all of these guys, and just enjoy each other's company, because I mean, is what it's all about at the end of the day. Look back on your games, and it's just, they're all games, but some of the memories you make and the people you meet, that's definitely the coolest thing of the game, and something I want to not forget, because it's the same in coaching. Like, the connections you make throughout it is just pretty special. And
he's one from one.
Yeah.
I think
one from one, mate. Like, I'm glad we got that one off my back, because
gig's easy.
If we lost, it was all going to be my fault, wasn't it? So it was like, now it's Penny's fault if we lose.
Where's it go? All right. So you basically replaced Goody, eh? So he was taking your role before that?
Yeah. So Goody was doing my role. So I'm guessing he was a part of it. He would have definitely, like, we're obviously really close mates. He was my best man at my wedding with my brother. Right. So, he's my best mate, and he's helped me out so much, not as just a player, but a coach as well. And he helped me get into Tasman when I was down there, and when he left he obviously probably mentioned me to Razor, and then I've heard like Razor's rung up all his connections, the ones that he felt like he needed to hear from, and they've obviously all said nice things, which is
Nice.
pretty humbling to hear. But that's how I pretty much got the job, was word of mouth. And I guess that's a big part of rugby, is like the connections and not burning bridges. And, you never really know who's watching or who's going to come back to be someone who you might need at some point. And I always remember that as a player, and it's even more so as a coach, I believe, because you impress the right coaches and they can take you on their journey with you, really.
Yeah, nice. Goody, he said that what he thought made you a great coach, you bring massive energy, which you're very consistent with, great rapport with the players, work really hard at what you do, and you're very calm, very rarely see you in the red, and lots of funny stories, which brings a lot of humour to the group. So he did ask to ask you a question about the Wellington Sevens days. Is there any stories there? Or?
Mate, you've certainly done your research. You've gone to All Black coaches, Samoa coaches, Tasman, Marco fullbacks. You've gone everywhere. So fair play. Wellington Sevens days. Oh, I reckon that was the best sporting event on the calendar back in the day, man. Yeah. Me and Goody used to catch the ferry over. We'd literally just be in our dress up. We'd have a bum bag on with our toothbrush and a phone and a wallet. And that was us for the weekend. So we'd spend sort of 3 days in our kit and just have a hell of a time. Yeah, so many stories. Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, we definitely had some good times. Like, we went as a tug of war team one year. That was probably one of the best ones. We would take a rope and different groups would challenge us, and lost a few mates off the harbour that day. Got pushed in or thrown into the water, and mate, some of those memories, so good, eh? Like, such good days, just enjoying it with your mates, watching code, how it should be. I'm so gutted that tournament's gone. Like, absolutely killed, because man, I would have been there for a year.
Nice. Before we move on from the coaching, what do you think is the biggest learning you've had to, or biggest thing that you've learned just in those last couple of years as a player going straight to coaching?
I think it's the art of coaching. Like, I've always felt like I had the rugby knowledge, very confident having open discussions with anyone around actual, like, the tactical side of the game, but the actual art of coaching and like the questioning and how to get the best out of the players and presenting and the slideshows and all the coding and all that different side of things has all been new to me. So literally that for me, like trying to learn as much as I can on that side of things, and grateful to be able to witness and watch some of the best coaches to do it. So what I like about them all, they all own their own style. Like, no one pretends to be someone they're not. They're all so unique, and they just sort of own what they do. So gives you confidence to just be yourself and not try and be anyone else. So whatever my character is, Goody sort of described it there, but that's what I try and be, and just own that and not try and be all serious or old school or
authenticity.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, nice. So, What a Lad podcast, when did that start? That was before you retired. You must have been playing at that point. What year was that?
It was, I had my hip surgery.
Oh, yeah.
So while I was in my rehab, I sort of set up the podcast. And that was one of my potential life after rugby ideas that I had: coaching, podcast, or working in an academy. And they were the three things that I sort of wrote down in my book, and did all three of them, and just sort of saw which one would go the furthest. And last year I was working at Nelson College, so I stopped doing that
Yeah.
Because coaching took over, and potentially probably should have stopped the podcast, but I've just loved doing it, and I feel like it's grown so much in the last few years. So I just wanted to keep doing it and behind the scenes, or especially in this off season I get now, opportunity to keep trying to grow it. Well, because I don't know where it's going to end up. I haven't got any real goals for it, but just sort of trying to keep being consistent and keep watching it grow.
Have you managed to monetize it yet, or is it still burning a hole like you talked about a wee while ago?
I do monetize it.
Nice.
I have been I probably tried earlier than I should have. Like, the reality is I thought I'd be able to make money off it earlier, but you really do have to be patient with it. You got to give it time. And now I've got sponsors who'll pay money for it, and I think that's the best way to do it. I also try and sell merch, which definitely doesn't make money. There's everyone just wants free kit. So you end up losing money off the merch. But no, I just love doing it, and it's definitely growing. And like I said, I don't know where it will end up, but I'd love to be in the position when I like, if I don't want to coach, I don't have to, and I could go full time into podcasting. That would be the dream for me. But I'm loving coaching at the moment, so I'd love to be able to
it's
keep
kind of PD
keep doing
as well,
it.
right, for your coaching?
Yeah, well, it's an opportunity to talk to
Yeah.
some of the best players around the world, best coaches, or whoever I want, who, you can go catch up with them for a coffee, but I think guys are way more receptive to coming on a podcast and catching up for a coffee, because even when you have a coffee, they often get distracted by phones or different other things. Where on the podcast, you're sitting down, you're talking for an hour and a half, and just having a conversation about anything or their journey. And it's always I always find it fascinating, all the different things that hold players back from becoming All Blacks, or how they became All Blacks, or challenges, or all these sort of things that you learn along the way. And as a coach, sort of take notes in the background and try and be one of those guys that can help these guys get to the position a lot of these guys have got to.
Yeah, nice. I think when Alistair and I decided to do this, we were kind of like, well, even if it doesn't make money or whatever, it's still pretty good to talk to a legend every couple of weeks. Like, if we didn't have a podcast, we wouldn't be talking to you now. We wouldn't have talked to Norm Maxwell last week. We wouldn't have talked to Adam Whitelock. Like, it's pretty cool. So, it's good fun. It's a lot of work, eh? That's the only thing. It's a lot of work.
It is. It's way more time consuming than people probably give it credit. And but you do learn as well. You learn to become more efficient. You learn to try and relax with the editing a little bit. I know when I first started, I was trying to edit everything to make it all try and sound perfect. But the reality is, no one really cares. They just want to hear the authentic conversation. Obviously, my edits now are like taking out the lags, or when we're trying to when we talk over top of each other, I'll take that stuff out. But generally try and leave just the conversation as raw as possible now.
Yeah, nice. What's the biggest thing you learned from podcasts, like in terms of being a podcaster or presenting or interviewing?
I think the art of listening is probably one for a podcaster. Like, if anyone out there is trying to learn to podcast, I think really listening to the conversation and trying to take their comments and try and make it flow into a next thing quite seamlessly. I guess that's the art of it, and without it feeling like it's a question to another question to another question, being able to just listen and flow on from that, or double down on those questions, or double down on their story that they're going through at the time. So I think that's probably the hardest thing to do, because you've obviously got your run sheet, all the things you want to get through. You're conscious of time, so being able to get through your run sheet without feeling like it's a dramatic change of change of scene or whatever it is. is definitely the art and something I still sort of struggle with, but I don't nail it every week, but it's yeah, I definitely find that the hardest part of it.
Yeah.
Outstanding.
You're doing a pretty good job though, mate. I actually I listened to a few of your early ones just because I thought, I wonder what it was. I thought you were pretty decent, like early on. Like it wasn't, like I've listened to a few other people who are like done 1,000 episodes and go back to their first one and they're, pretty cringy, but you're pretty good to start with. Not that we're experts, we're like number 10. We're getting there. Who's your top 3 guests in the hit list you'd want to, if you could have anyone?
Oh, it's such a tough question, eh? Like, I don't really know. I've got a massive list of like 200 lads who I'm keen to get on. Hard to order them. No, I haven't gone any outrageous names or anyone like that, but
I think you got plenty of outrageous names already, haven't you? Yeah. Just because they're your mates.
Yeah, that's true. Like, it's funny. Like people see a lot of these guys as like massive deals, but yeah, obviously when you're around them all the time, they're just like normal people. So
yeah,
that's what I love about it. I can sort of give it insight into what these guys are really like, because they do feel comfortable. They don't feel like it's a full-on interview. They can just sort of talk shit and have a yarn. So that is what I do love about it. And I think being in the environment definitely helps that because I do know what they're like. So if they are faking it or being this weird person that they're not usually, you can call them up on it pretty quick and stop it and start again.
Yeah. What about the pranks? It hadn't been on for a while.
No, the pranks are done. So the pranks were pranks. I used to do those for the info committee, which was like you just get up the front of the bus. So I ended up making video recordings, and I guess that's how I started learning about GarageBand and all these editing tools, because I'd make these little sort of 5-10 minute audio packages of just rinsing the boys for that week. And when new guys would come to the team, I'd always try and prank them so that I'd have them for the season. So I'd have like a bank of sort of 6 or 7 pranks to get through for the year. And then when I started the podcast, I was trying to do 2 episodes a week, which was tough work while I was coaching and trying to rehab as well. So I ended up just using up a heap of the pranks just to get 2 episodes out those weeks because they were already I'd already done them. So
nice.
I still love listening back to some of those when I'm in need of a laugh, because always cracks me up, some of them.
So I was talking to Tom, and he proudly says that you've never managed to get him. But he's even more proud the fact that he absolutely got you. Can you tell us about that time? I think he's probably one of the best.
He was over at my house. He was staying with me this weekend, so he said that you were messaging him. And he was like, "Oh, what's a bad yarn? What's a yarn you don't want me to tell?" I was like, "Oh, don't tell him about the prank you got me with." I was just taking the piss. I didn't care, but he was like, "Oh, I'm gonna share that one." So that was 6 before 6 morning. I was hammered, and we caught a taxi to the house, and I left my wallet in the car, and they pranked me pretending to be the taxi driver, saying that I'd left my wallet and I had to pay him like $50 for him to come and pick it up, and he wanted me to wave my $50 on the corner of the street, so he knew that it was him because he was part of a gang or something. It got real elaborate, and I was like, "What the hell? This is so weird." But anyway, I didn't even think twice, and I was out there on the corner waving my $50, and then all the boys were in on it, and they all come out laughing with my wallet and fair play. But yeah, sometimes it's quite good to be on the other end to know what it feels like.
Yeah, nice. Oh, that was gold. When I heard that, I was rubbing my hands. Nice. So one last thing before we finish up. What about in terms of mental skills? Did you have much help with the mental side of the game with any sports psychs or anything that helped you in that department in terms of your rugby?
It's something I would have done, spend a lot more time on if I started my career again. I'm always a bit of a skeptic with things. I don't believe in things until I, feel it for myself, and often find it hard to buy into some of that stuff, especially early on. But I look at my career now, and I wish that I did spend more time on it. So many things have come out now where I look at it and I watch it as a coach, and I just think, man, I wish I spent a little bit more time on some of my mental skills, and because I guess that's the difference between the good players and the great players. Like, no one's bigger, faster, stronger, really, unless you're Lomu, but most of them are literally similar strength, similar size, speed, all that's all becoming pretty even, but it's the mental side of the game, which, like the Conrad Smith is the great example. He was slow, weak, couldn't jump. Like, you wouldn't expect him to be, one of the greatest All Black centre ever, but he is, because he's smart and he understood the game, understood his mental game. He was always calm under pressure, made great decisions under pressure. He was one of my favourite players to play with, just because of all of those abilities that he had. So, I would have done it differently. I didn't spend a huge amount of time on it in my career, but definitely would now if I went back again.
If you came across a guy like you and that was a bit skeptical like that, what do you reckon? Is there much of a secret you could help them sort of get across the line in terms of that department?
I think it's getting them to look, especially for me, look into it myself. Like, it's easy for some guy to just come and stand in front of us and tell me that I need to breathe through one nostril and exhale through my ears or something, and believe it. Like, you got to. I feel like you got to sort of go through it, look into it yourself. Try things that work for you or what doesn't, and just be more curious with that side of the game would be probably the advice. Just get them to look into it themselves and try and drive it themselves. Yeah,
nice. We have this one thing we started teaching a lot more of, and I think it's a bit more mainstream now. It's sort of a bit more accepted, and people probably believe in it a bit more now that a lot of the All Blacks talk about it, and Israel Adesanya talks about it, and that sort of stuff. Do you think that'd be fair? Has it changed a little bit since then, like the last few years?
Yeah, I think so. Like, I think that's where the game's going. Like, everyone's looking for the edge, and seems to be the edge, like mental skills, breath work, all these little things which weren't really spoken about that long ago, and now like heavily part of the players' makeup, I guess, part of their training regime. It has to be, because if you don't keep up, you get left behind. So yeah,
for sure. Awesome, mate. Anything else, Al?
No, that's it from me on the sort of run sheet side of things. Yeah.
Cool. We've got a couple of questions from the gram. There was one. This is a random one. Guy James Watkin. I don't know if you know him, but he says, "Do you remember James Broadhurst and yourself getting picked up and dropped off at your hotel, given Macca's by some random after winning the NPC final in 2014 in New Plymouth?"
I do not remember that.
Well, that was James Atkins.
Oh, he
so
was
you can
a
thank
lad. Thanks for those Maccas, mate. That is much appreciated.
Who else do we have? Noah Barrett was asking, who's the most athletic Crusader in the squad at the moment?
Most athletic. Oh, it's a tough one because I guess you can go different ways with it. But someone like a Macca Springer, young, explosive, all the attributes, fast, makes things look really easy. He's someone that's would be right up there on that side of things.
Yep, nice. Toughest opponent to tackle?
Oh, mate, so many. Jose Aguirre was someone I always struggled with. He'd sort of just stand there and just fend without coming towards you, or if he was coming towards you, he'd have a massive bunt, which was really hard to get hold of. Nemani Nadolo, tried him at full steam, and that was tough.
Yeah.
So much weight behind it. Like, I hit him pretty hard. I got a stinger, but I still didn't make the tackle. So I knew that I'd probably given it everything.
Yeah.
But
Physics just beat you.
Physics beat me on that one. No, there's a lot of hard players to tackle, to be fair. Yeah, those are a couple that stand out there.
Nice. Most inspirational captain or coach?
Conrad Smith, like I spoke about before, was someone I always really respected and someone I admired as a captain. Yeah, probably him.
Nice. And one last one from your brother. Where is it? Where is it? Why do you love dancing in a Guinness factory?
Mate, you've gone full detail here with Tom. This is good stuff. No, I actually played a game of odds with my wife.
Yeah.
So we were at the Guinness factory. We were over in Dublin for a weekend away from the kids. We hadn't been drinking yet. First thing we went to was the Guinness factory, and someone started playing some Irish music, and I just said to my wife, odds of you getting up there and dancing randomly for 30 seconds or whatever, and she's like, oh, no way, like 150.
Yeah.
So oh, sweet. Yeah, and obviously got it wrong. She did it to me, and we both said 7. I was like, holy shit. So I had to walk past all these people who were ready to do a tour and start dancing weirdly in front of.
What'd you go with?
Just like some weird Irish dance. I'm not a dancer at all. Just started like kicking my feet and just like bobbing around. But
river dance.
Some people started like clapping and getting like right in behind it, which made it worse because it brought more attention to me. And just one of those moments where I was like, oh, this is not ideal. Thank God no one's got a camera.
Oh, how good. Oh, awesome. Thanks, mate. Thanks so much for your time, Jimmy. We really love the Water Lad podcast. So it's an absolute pleasure to get you on the other side of the mic and hear about your career and, the whole story. And then how you've transitioned so quickly into coaching is pretty impressive. And just hope to see the podcast keep growing. You can't get Robbie Fruin. We've signed an exclusivity deal. He's only going with us. So. But no, if you keep hassling him, you might get there. But thanks so much, mate. Love talking to you and really appreciate your time.
No worries, lads. Appreciate it. Like, awesome work. Awesome to be on your podcast. You guys are doing great things. So keep rolling with it and keep growing your one as well.
Thanks, mate. We'll keep battling away.
Appreciate it, lads.
Cheers, mate. Cheers. Thanks for listening to the Evolve Your Game podcast. Hope you've taken some insight and enjoyed what we had to offer today. Make sure you like and subscribe and share on your socials. Tag us. We always like to see who's listening. And we'll catch you back next week on the Evolve Your Game podcast.